right, cool. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Tired Boys podcast. This is our second live stream for the recording, but happy to be here. Aaron, good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to see you too. It's going to be a really exciting week. I know I say that pretty much every week, but this was a banger of a race. Lots of good highlights. Lots of good highlights across the weekend with Formula 2 and Formula 3 as well. So, yeah, we've got kind of the full rundown today for the episode. But how are you feeling? What were your what's your excitement level after that race?
My excitement level is super high. It was close battle, obviously, all the way through. A couple of questions from the F2 and F3 races. I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts. But yeah, overall, I thought it was really fun. I thought it may be, up there, probably one of the better races of this year so far. So yeah, overall, I just think it was a really fun time out at Silverstone.
Yeah, and of course we'll talk more about it, but I definitely agree. I thought this was one of the best races, if not the best, of the season. I'll compare some of the races more. But first we'll get into the quick hitters for this week's episode and start
Sounds good. Let's do it.
The typical topics. So first one that I saw actually just earlier this afternoon, but Toyota has started to put some interest out there for interest in joining Formula One again. They've been apparently having conversations with Haas as one of their potential engine partners to come back into the sport and everything. And now that we're seeing more and more teams kind of find their own unique engine providers, I think that is just making it a lot more interesting across the board. Red Bull, of course, has their own powertrain that will be working with Ford. Aston Martin's going to be going to Honda, Ferrari, Mercedes. There's conversation of Alpine no longer being a works team with the Renault engine and possibly looking to one of the other providers. If Andretti comes in, Cadillac's coming in with them. I mean, it's pretty cool because I think that not only kind of reshapes the field a bit in terms of teams kind of figuring things out, but I like the idea of so many different teams having their own engine supplier as opposed to what we're seeing right now with like McLaren and Ferrari, for instance, being the engine providers for multiple other teams, and those teams are just kind of seen typically as the like step down outside of when Mercedes had their side podless cars that were just the aerodynamics weren't working out. I mean, when you see the other vehicles, the Aston Martin being powered as well as blanking as the Williams are typically just like kind of the sister like teams essentially with that engine supplier. So what are your thoughts on that? I think it just opens the door for it to be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it does sound like the more engine suppliers possibly maybe competition goes up in some way. But yeah, I think the interesting thing would be, so the conversation to my mind has always been the difference between, like you said, a works team and a customer team. So the difference being works team are building all of their parts in-house for their car, engine included, and like transmission and all of that included. And then customer team is like buying some amount of parts and then likely, an engine usually. So it sounds like what's happening is instead of having these engine suppliers that are going to be, selling to 2 or 3 teams, it seems like, okay, you're either a works team or you're going to look for a manufacturer to make an engine for just you. Right?
Like an engine partner for your team, right, as opposed to just being a buyer, I guess.
Right. And that's like way more interesting to me, where then then it's more of a like a relationship, like you said, like a partnership in some way, where the idea around customer teams is like, oh well, are the parts to the chassis, like, do they marry that well, and isn't like,
Right.
don't you give something up by not having it like all be to built to work together, right? So
Right.
yeah, changing to these, what sounds like they're going to be kind of singular selling to just one team. That sounds very interesting to me, and not just teams that we already know, like you mentioned, a bunch of a bunch of companies that could really shake things up and be new to the sport and bring in, fresh eyes, fresh competition, whatever it may be. Yeah, I think that's like pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen, like you said, the chassis not being married to engine components and everything with cars on the grid currently. The Saubers, I believe, who use Ferrari engines, have had to create additional parts to, or like design their car in a certain way to allow them to use. I think the push rod steering as opposed to a pull rod, which is what Ferrari's like engine and layout and everything is designed for. So just to be able to design their car the way they want to, they've had to like take extra steps to work around this engine. Where yeah, if you have your own specific supplier, you can kind of work with them to make those fit together. So yeah, I think it just opens the door for more excitement, variation, and as these suppliers are floating around, if one drops out, another one might pick up a second team, as opposed to right now where we have Mercedes supplying the engines for Mercedes, Aston Martin, McLaren, Williams, and then we have Ferrari supplying theirs, Haas, Sauber, and so that I think just makes it a bit more intriguing overall. But to move on to the next one, this is just kind of a real quick one. But the new F1 movie that I believe is just called F1, with that's the Brad Pitt movie and everything. All the little tidbits and little sneak peeks and stuff that I've seen have all just looked super like cheesy and kind of weird. Like the Brad Pitt's character's, I guess, Instagram page put a story up of like all. I guess it was like edited after the qualifying for F1 with the top three. Spoiler alert: top three were all British in qualifying for Formula One, but he added in like edited in his like teammate who is, I guess, British in the movie, into this like picture and posted on their Instagram story. It was just kind of bizarre, and it feels like a lot of things are just so pigeonholed because they're doing so much of the production with the race weekends in Formula One. Like there are videos of Fernando Alonso, like he's doing his post-race interview or whatever, and like Brad Pitt walks by with like a like PR person or whatever for his team in like for I guess some filming thing of the post-race interviews and all, and Fernando just kind of like watches them and is like, what is going on here? So
Yeah.
everything I've seen just looks a little cheesy. I hope it's not, because I know Lewis has also had a part, I think, in some of the I believe he's been like a consultant type person for it, or maybe
Okay.
like an associate producer. So I don't know how much he is directing the actual course of this movie, but yeah, I'm still gonna watch it, but
Sure.
it might not be as good of a watch, but it might still be a fun watch.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a fun watch. The thing that I couldn't get away from was the like they're doing like modern F1. They're like in the trailer they have They have Gunther Steiner like leaning out from the like pit wall. He's like standing in the, they do like the opening ceremonies where they like play the national anthem and they do the whole thing and all the drivers are there. There's like a shot of that and then just, Brad Pitt and his teammate there. It feels like what they're doing is like editing in themselves to like to Formula One footage. It feels like a high school movie project where they're like, okay, we're going to take existing footage of Formula One races and we're going to edit ourselves in as the 11th team.
Yeah.
It feels really weird. I wish they would just do some, like, just alternate reality where, like, F1 still exists, but just do all fake team names, do all fake drivers. Even if you want to bring in, like, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and even if you want them all in your movie, like, that's fine. But wait, why not just make up names for them? Give them character names. It doesn't make sense that, like, it just feels like Brad Pitt just, like, playing race car driver. That's what it feels like. And it's just so silly.
This tweet that I saw that posted the Instagram thing, their tweet was, "This F1 movie is literally just a self-insert fan fiction and not even a good one." And I was like
there we go.
Yeah, it's just it's F1 2024 video game. But like you get to play as the 11th team with Brad Pitt's character and his teammate. that's
so funny.
That's what the movie is. So it'll be interesting to see if it's as rough as it appears.
The soundtrack, them just looping "We Are the Champions" in the trailer, that doesn't give me a lot of hope, but I can say that's really exciting that they're doing, like, the fake Instagram page, the fake Twitter page for these, like, not real characters. I think that's fun and honestly a great way to go about it. I was really intrigued. I don't know if you remember the Cloverfield movies. That was one of the angles around Cloverfield, is they did like a world building thing, like in the real world. There were like Facebook pages and posts from like employees of the drilling company that drilled down and like released the creature that is the thing in Cloverfield. So like it's almost like like some form of guerrilla marketing,
absolutely.
And that's sweet, but it just feels,
it's a great strategy, but the actual film itself feels like it's not going to be very good.
I'd rather watch Need for Speed 3 times.
That's fair, but maybe it'll be like one of those so bad that it's good.
That's what we're hoping. But I don't think something that is like as internationally like viewed, like that can't be culty. It's just going to be bad.
Probably. But yeah. I think the most recent one was Need for Speed 11, More Need, More Speed. But
no, the movie that has Stranger Things sheriff in it, where he's like, in the game you can just reset if you go off here.
Gran Turismo.
Yeah, Gran Turismo. Like, if it's that level, like, if it's similar to that, I'm down. Like, that was just fun.
I enjoyed it. It was like a one-time watch, but it was a solid one. I had a good time, but one-time watch through. But I don't know. I think it'll be fun to see, but I've really been intrigued. Every time that they're filming at a race weekend, I just see all these things pop up from it, and it's kind of hilarious. But so
Apex GP.
Yep. It's going to be, I think Nick DeVries gets highlighted in it. I think he gets replaced by either Brad Pitt's character, or I think he was there, like, one of their drivers, and gets, like, dropped for one of the other guys. Whoa. I believe that's what happens from what I saw.
Dude,
where
now I
someone could
have
just
to
been
see it.
Someone could have just been trolling me and
Right.
done some AI generated picture with Nick DeVries. Who knows? But to get back into the more real world of F1 with the last quick hitter here, Pirelli apparently has started working. It was reported about a month ago, a little over a month ago, that they're working on a C6 tire compound, so a very even softer, slick tire that would potentially be available for some of the street circuits and everything, the Monacos, the Bakus and everything, to give higher tire degradation, kind of force additional pit stops and everything in the race, so that we're not ending up as much with these races where something like this year's Monaco happens, where there's a lap one incident, and then Charles Leclerc just gets to run away with it for the rest because everyone swaps to the swaps tires on the red flag, and they can make it to the end of the race. This hopefully will force those races to be like probably a two-stopper instead of a one-stop race, where something like that could really just nullify a lot of the race itself and kind of change up the strategy. So I think that's a good move. A lot of people were calling for it after seeing what happened with Monaco. No knock to Charles Leclerc and everything, and great home win, but it was not a very exciting race outside the last 30 seconds of him finishing, and the first maybe minute when the Haas's and Checo collided.
Yeah, but I feel like that's every year at Monaco. Like, it is, lap one incident or not, a lot of times it is the pole sitter, like, who wins the race.
Oh, yeah,
the problem isn't necessarily the especially in Monaco, it's not that the compound was able to go all the way to the end of the race. It's the loophole of they get to satisfy the must change compounds rule just right there, and then the compound goes all the way to the end of the race. So your angle would be like, okay, if that's all it takes to get to the end of the race, then isn't the C6 exciting? Because even in a race like that, it will at least force one more pit stop for the chance for a little bit of jeopardy. Okay, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Because otherwise, Monaco still very easily could be like no changes at all, like throughout the race, really hardly any passing. But by forcing an additional pit stop, it kind of puts it back into that team play situation, as opposed to it just being kind of like lap one. I mean, if one set of tires, none of those tires were going to die by going one extra lap on them, so they literally just had tires that would have gone the entire race without pitting. And so to avoid that, I think adding another softer compound to shift the scale a little bit more is a decent way to kind of force that a little bit, or hopefully encourage that to be the case.
Yeah, that's not bad. That makes sense to me.
So that wraps up the quick hitters for the week. So moving into one of our other very frequent segments with all of the different roster and team changes and everything, we've got You Work here. So officially, we've got a couple of announcements here where it was announced Enrico Cardile, who's the technical director of the chassis area at Ferrari, has stepped down with immediate effect. So Fred Vasseur is going to take over in the interim, leading up that chassis area until they find a new person to step up to that technical director role. I don't recall if it was announced where Cardile is leaving to go, but it'll be I think that's a pretty huge change to a Ferrari team who's kind of had their struggles over recent weeks and everything with development and whatnot. Whether that's a chassis issue or an aerodynamics issue or what, I'm not sure what's really been causing their grief. But that that opening will be interesting to see who they fill it with.
The position that Enrico will be filling is the Aston Martin F1 Chief Technical Officer for 2025.
Gotcha.
So
this,
not
I guess,
only
starts his gardening leave and everything before being able to join Aston Martin.
For sure, yeah. And I just wanted to confirm that because I'd seen that earlier, and yeah, he's going to be going to Aston Martin. So yeah, I think that'll be pretty cool. But yeah, I'm always curious what precipitates these kind of moves. Where is it like a lack of something, or is it just like we're trying to maybe make improvements? Is it like this guy's decision where he wants to make maybe some kind of just career move, change of scenery. There you go. Yeah, just maybe more money. But yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how Fred does in the interim. I don't know how much he'll have to do with development and everything. I'm sure their kind of pipeline is relatively set with the direction and everything for the rest of the season at least. But this will give them some time to figure things out. But the other official announcement was that Ollie Behrman is confirmed for one of the Haas seats for next year. So he's on a multi-year contract. It was reported with Haas. So it'll be exciting to see him come in. He had, of course, a great performance and is still, I think he's still up in like P12 in the championship or something like that for Formula One. So he's gonna be here. I think the Haas is looking really good, and that's a exciting move for a good young driver coming in.
Yeah, it is really exciting, and I was thinking about it from the angle of the new team principal for Haas, Komatsu. It will be his first like major signing for the squad as team principal. Because remember, this is his first year as, I believe. So yeah, I think that's kind of exciting. We'll see under his leadership, his because right now he has Gunther Steiner's lineup that he inherited. So going into 2025, it'll be kind of his show fully, and not that like Gunther Steiner's decisions were wrong or anything like that. Just saying like now it's like fresh, his choices, kind of his like administration, you could say. So yeah, I think that's very exciting. Ollie Behrman, I think is a pretty solid choice. One that is like showing results in the series that he's currently racing, and I think is a really exciting prospect for 2025, especially if you look at like what Hülkenberg's doing in the car now, and a little secondary like what Magnussen's able to do. I think it's really exciting for the possibility of and this is kind of leading into the next point is the possibility of Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon as the Haas lineup for 2025. That sounds really solid to me, because as we know, Hülkenberg is, moving on as well. So yeah, I think for Haas, things are looking up.
Yeah, and I think there's still some debates about. I assume Magnussen's most likely gone, but I think he still has the potential to hang on to that seat with some good performances. Probably not super likely, but yeah, I mean, I think Ocon, he's a race winner. He's a seasoned veteran now in Formula One with a number of different teams. He's been a reserve driver with Mercedes. He's been on Renault. He's kind of Racing Point. He's been in a number of different places and had decent success. So having a younger kind of veteran driver with the rookie Ollie Behrman will be, I think, a pretty good pairing if that ends up being the case. One of the other drivers who may be out, Logan Sargent. Of course, there were some reports of him potentially joining IndyCar. I just thought it was interesting with so Prima Racing is joining IndyCar in 2025. They have been in Formula 3 and Formula 2, I believe, both for a decent bit of time. And Logan Sargent actually raced for Prima in 2020 on their Formula 3 team.
Okay.
So I was curious because knowing that they were involved in those other Formula Series, Formula Feeder Series, I was curious if he had ever had any connection to them essentially, and comes out, yeah, he did back in Formula 3, which is pretty nice way to, I guess, be able to transition potentially to a new racing series, having some, I assume there's some similarities in terms of the people and structure of the team and everything that maybe he'll have a little bit of comfort with going to the team, if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for that reason, and this likely isn't just for driving, but just, good business practice in general is when you can, end on amicable terms, never be, never be a resentful or spiteful employee, because you never know when you may need another job, right? So it sounds like Logan Sargent had a good impression on Prima Racing, and it's those types of bridge buildings that you really need. I imagine in motorsport, there are a very, very limited amount of drives available, and relationships are going to be able to get you those drives. So I'm happy to hear that Logan has a possible drive going for next year, and IndyCar will definitely be a solid home. It's a really competitive format over there. We just saw at this last Mid Ohio race, we saw Palou and Ward going at it. So I think if you're looking for exciting racing as Logan Sargent, that'd be a great place, because there's some solid drivers and some exciting tracks over in IndyCar. And I mean, as I'm following these other series and getting to know some of the other teams and drivers and individuals, I hear Prima Racing a good amount. So it sounds like they're having some success here kind of currently and recently as an organization. So yeah, it sounds like a pretty solid spot for Logan. Sounds like he's been a good egg throughout his early career.
Yeah, well, and that's so Prima Racing is where both Ollie Behrman and Kimi Antonelli are currently in Formula 2. So
right.
It definitely has a good pedigree as a team, 100%. And for Logan, I think maybe moving to IndyCar, it could be just a good comfort level move to be in the States and everything as well, being an American. It's definitely not a bad option for next potential drive. But looking at just some other quick notes on other teams, Carlos Sainz has been rumored to be one of the leaning more towards Alpine, and them both being each other's kind of top options currently. And part of that is apparently due to Williams, I believe, and James Vowles. It sounds from some reports that they had given kind of a time or a date for Carlos to hey, you need to take this contract by this date, otherwise it's not necessarily still on the table. And apparently he did not before that time passed. So Williams has started to move away from that option and everything to look to solidify next year's lineup. Valtteri Bottas, of course, being one of those top contenders for that seat that's been discussed. So there's some potential there. And then finally, Liam Lawson with Red Bull is set to do a test this week at Silverstone in the RB20. So another kind of potential option in that Red Bull world, as we'll talk about Red Bull and their team and everything. Max just hasn't been hacking it lately, and that seat might be up for grabs before too long. So you got to keep Liam Lawson warm in the bullpen.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you yeah, so Max is like a really large positive, but it's funny, like if you're able to like peek behind that, if you're able to like, just like catch a glimpse of what's behind, it's like uh it's like a dirty room. The dishes are still in the sink. I mean, Max, he's blocking a lot of it. You can't see it, but the TV's caved in. We don't have curtains on the windows, and you're like, oh man, it's like actually kind of a shamble back there.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully Liam Lawson brings some positivity to the camp. With like a really solid test, maybe give some maybe some hope, just some positivity going,
Just
because right now,
rejuvenate the team a little bit. Yeah,
dude,
reignite
for
that
real.
fire.
Do you know in Space Jam when they go to the old gym and it's like all dilapidated and they do the spit shine and clean it up? That's what we need from Liam Lawson. We need the spit shine at Silverstone in the RB20.
Hey, that's how Danny Ricks won his seat last year, or I guess 2 years ago, to replace
Exactly.
DeVries. So there you go.
Man.
Could happen again.
Just don't look behind Max and you won't see the
whole mess. Back there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so before we get into the rest of the British Grand Prix race weekend, we just wanted to remind everyone, if you are not following and you're watching on Twitch, go ahead and hit that follow button. We'd really appreciate it. You'll get notifications when we go live. If you hit that little bell there on YouTube and Spotify, of course, subscribe. We really appreciate it, and we're looking to hit 100 subscribers on YouTube and Spotify by the end of the year, and then hopefully we can get some of you all onto the Twitch as well. But
yeah, we just really appreciate you tuning in. So thank you very much for checking out the Tyred Boys podcast. But yeah, back to the program.
So getting into the Formula 3 races first with the sprint race and feature race, you said you had some questions about F2 and F3. So why don't you lead us into that?
So my question here for F3 specifically, now I wonder what you think about possibly, depending on conditions, mandating a tire change, because in F3 most of what we saw was the slick versus wet difference. All the people on slicks were just like literally fishtailing around and just crashing into the people that were on the wet tires. So while yes, though there can be compound differences that make for exciting racing, but I'm curious, do you believe, for safety's sake, in a scenario like that, mandating a tire change would be a positive thing?
I think that there would have to be a slightly different rule maybe implemented.
Okay.
And so one thing that I'm pretty certain, I don't believe in Formula 3 that they have an intermediate tire. I'm pretty sure they just have the slicks or the full wet as tire options. So I think, in my opinion, if you are going to mandate drivers to be on a specific tire due to conditions, I would personally say if it is wet enough that some drivers are if it's wet enough for the wet tires, then you should only be able to, unless it's mid-race and everything, that gets kind of tougher, but at least for starting
of
differences
course.
And everything, it would have to be a very differently set up rule, I guess, to or specially designed rule to do that. But maybe if there are people on the full wets, like you allow people to also choose the intermediates as a potential option. But I'm not entirely sure what the best rule would be there, because if the race is rainy and wet, I mean, in all of these racing series, like part of what could gain you a win or a loss, I mean, we saw it in Formula One, is how you handle the tire strategy and everything. So I feel like I would lean almost towards no, even in terms of like a safety thing. I think the teams, that should be kind of generally left up to the teams, because obviously they don't want their drivers crashing out either. So
Right.
That's already kind of encouragement enough to make the right choices on tires and everything in general. But then again, we saw with Arvid Lindblad in the second race of F3 that he was on the slick tires, was just dropping back through the field when it was raining heavier all the way. He was back in, I think, 21st at one point during that that feature race. And then once the track dried out and there was that crossover with the wet tires, people pitting onto slicks and just people staying out on the wets, he breezed all the way up into P2 and took the win there, with the driver in P1 having a penalty. So, like, in that side of it, I mean, he did stay out on the slicks, but he was able to control it through and even ended up with a race win.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, I see that it's a double-edged sword, but like part of me feels like, whoa, that was like a pretty exciting race. It was kind of like in the driver's hands, but then you see some of those crashes and you're just like, well, that just wouldn't happen, right? And I obviously don't know which is best, but just like seeing a race like that where there's just like fishtailing drivers in between people that are just like trying to safely hold their line, it just seems sketchy for how much gain. I don't really know. So yeah, I was just interested in what your thoughts are, and I think that's a pretty even, a pretty measured take. And ultimately, I think I agree with you. I don't know how exciting mandatory tires are, but yeah, just in a race like that, it just raises the question at least.
And I think the other, like, difficulty, I guess, to some extent of this is you also, like, the pit stops are different. You have one person per tire at the pit stop and everything. So, like, a forced, like, everyone has to pit, and you just are forced to double stack with your drivers and everything in F2 is a lot more complex. You'd need a pretty big gap in between, because their stationary time is maybe 10, 12 seconds sometimes. So I think that I would lean towards no, but I do also think that sometimes you have to, especially with these younger developing drivers and everything, to put a little bit more structure or some like training wheels in place to some extent. So I don't know if that's the right one or what would be best, but you don't like to see the sketchiness and everything. But
yeah,
it's
exactly.
Pretty complex decision.
Oh yeah, of course. But yeah, overall, that was just kind of like my question after the F3 events were over. Obviously, pretty fun racing, and all of the cars are just super competitive with each other. You see, 2-3 wide in a bunch of different sectors. They're all sticking with each other really well. So, if you're talking about wheel to wheel racing, I mean, that was very exciting. I think Silverstone makes for some very fun racing. So yeah, Formula 3 just a bit wet. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts were on the F2 races.
Yeah, so I have to start out with Kimi Antonelli, of course, making us eat our words after we talked about him not being a race winner, questioning the potential decision for him coming up to Mercedes and taking Lewis's seat. He goes, well, go ahead.
Well, I don't know about eating our words.
I mean,
until that point, he was not a race winner.
No, it's just funny that it's like immediately after we have this conversation about, is he the right fit? He hasn't won anything. There's like, I don't know if he's there. He just goes out, pulls out the win.
For sure, silence the haters. That's for sure.
But yeah, I mean, a really nice drive in the wet weather for F2 as well. He kind of ran away with it he gets a good start out front, takes the lead through turn 1, and then was just able to control the race really from there through safety cars, through a red flag. He built a pretty significant gap at the end of the race to win, and being out front in the wet weather, we heard them talk about it in the F1 race on the broadcast as well. With, I think it was George, when it started getting a bit rainier, saying that that's kind of tough. Like, every time that you're going around the circuit, you're trying to figure out the new line as it's raining more and everything, or where there's traction and all. So to build that kind of gap out front, that is it's just impressive. And so big props to him. We also, of course, had some really exciting fights between some of the teammates. Maini and Bortoletto have been kind of going back and forth with each other throughout the season, and so we had some more action between them as well during the sprint race. But yeah, there was a little bit of craziness there too with Paul Aaron and Pepe Marti having some contact. Isaac Hadjar, who was second to Paul Aaron in the championship, collides with Paul Aaron, who's going slowly, and so some craziness there that brings out that red flag and all. But an exciting race there, and a nice win for Antonelli.
Yeah, I think the trade-off in that scenario is, you are always looking for the grip, especially like if more and more water is being laid down on the track. But obviously the big trade-off is the spray, where you're not going into other drivers, kicking up that wall of water. While there are disadvantages, some advantages to be had as well. But always jeopardy in the spray, and I think Kimi Antonelli did a great job in the first race.
Yeah, very, very impressive. Unfortunately, in the feature race, Antonelli was hit and gets knocked out in just a racing incident during the first lap of the race. So an unfortunate way for that to go on his end. But over in the feature race, Ollie Behrman, his teammate, had a really great start. Was climbing up the field up into P5 pretty quickly, ends up finishing in P7 over in the race, but had a nice drive. But we saw a few drivers kind of struggle early on, and which is part of Antonelli just got that big jump. Some of the other drivers, like Isaac Hadjar, who actually ended up being the race winner for the feature race, dropped down to P4 off the first lap, and was struggling quite a bit there. So a tough start, but he was able to really climb back up. Paul Aaron unfortunately had some issues with contact as well in the race, and ends up out of the points. So not a good weekend for Paul Aaron, getting no points, and he ends up losing the lead in the championship to Hadjar, who jumped him with that race win in the feature race.
Yeah, and I thought in the feature race, the last what was it? The last 4 to 5 laps, we had Hadjar, Crawford, and Maloney all kind of fighting. Primarily it was Crawford and Hadjar, but Maloney was closing towards the final sectors. We get that lovely radio message of Hadjar being told that Crawford ahead's got the 5 second penalty. He's within that window, so all he's got to do is just keep pushing. He's got his race engineer just saying, he's got this penalty. Just calm down, keep your head down. So yeah, I thought it was a very exciting end to the race. Maloney in the hunt as well. Ultimately, I don't think he, had they had a few more laps, ultimately I don't think he had the pace. But yeah, right there at the end was quite exciting. And then Hadjar being within that 5 seconds, able to take home the dub.
Well, and ironically, the penalty that Crawford got was for an unsafe release into Maloney's way, where I think they had a little bit of contact, or at least were very close in the pit lane exiting there. So if his team had held him up and he was waiting and everything, the potential of the same official order would have been there as well, with Hadjar up front and then Crawford and Zane Maloney in third there. So I think that's or I guess Maloney and then Crawford. So I think that would have been potentially the way it ended up anyway. But it's kind of nice when those penalties actually work out the way that it would make logical sense that it would have most likely worked out. So
right.
But yeah, a big weekend for Isaac Hadjar. Goes and gets that feature race win. He also was one of the kind of moving over into the F1 talk a little bit. We had a number of the FP1 practice session rookie driver requirements that teams had drivers out there. Ollie Behrman was out, Jack Doohan for Alpine, Franco Colapinto for Williams, and Hadjar for Red Bull in Q1, or not Q1, FP1. And so Hadjar gets the feature race win, drives FP1, gets a $20,000 fine for almost hitting Lando in a pretty impeding Lando pretty dangerously. The team got fined, though they had not given him the proper information that Lando was coming up quickly behind him.
Right.
But just in general, cool to see a lot of those young drivers out there getting the practice session. It's great for Ollie Behrman to be able to get that Haas practice session in and everything, especially now that he's been announced for having that drive. Just more time for him to get comfortable in the machinery and everything before this coming year.
Yeah, and we know he's had hours upon hours of simulator time with Ferrari. We know he's had some F1 machinery training with Ferrari as well. He had the race as well, so a lot of prior experience for Behrman, but I think what kind of updates him the most is the machinery that he will be driving, that Haas car, because obviously they're going to be very different, and the Haas car is going to have idiosyncrasies that were not present on the Ferrari. So just giving him time to acclimate himself with, kind of a Haas race weekend, acclimate himself with the car that he'll be driving. Great opportunity for Oliver Behrman here in the Haas. They're satisfying, like you said, requirements from the FIA, but from the driver's perspective, he's got the contract in hand. I mean, what a great way to just push it forward right away. Get that contract signed and get in a car and drive it. That's like super exciting.
Yeah, and similarly with Jack Doohan, I know he's of course been one of the top potential drivers for the Alpine and everything, outside of course Carlos Sainz now being in that conversation, which of course I think a lot of teams, if they have the opportunity, would take a guy like Carlos Sainz over a rookie who has a lot of potential with Doohan. But him getting that time as well, if he ends up in that seat, that's a great opportunity for him to also just like show the team kind of what he can do and put in some good laps and everything out on the circuit. So that was a nice thing to see. I think we have one more, or most of the teams have to still do one additional at the very least of these rookie practice session requirements. The other, after last week, we talked about a lot with Max and Lando and their incident at Austria, but this weekend things have really like mellowed out with all of that. So I'm glad that things kind of evened out. It sounds like Max and Lando are still friends. They still will play padel together and everything, or paddle,
Nice.
or however you pronounce it. Yeah, I think they're all good. So just wanted to provide the update on that.
Yeah, well, honestly, like, I can't enjoy Formula One if they're not all homies. And, like, when I know that, like, one of them is mad at another one, like, it gets me, like, really anxious and nervous. I just, like, fervently just, like, check their social media. I message them on social media, and I'm just like, hey, like, I just need to know that the boys are good, honestly. So
I mean,
yeah, I'm sleeping much better.
That's the first thing that I look for when these new drivers are coming in is like, could they be my homie? Like, would we chill and vibe?
Right.
Like, because if I feel like I'm a pretty amicable person, and so like I think if they could be my homie, then they'd fit into a lot of groups. So I feel like I use myself as that self-insert fan fiction to test the waters with these two drivers.
As long as I can picture myself having a beer with them, that's what's gonna make me feel really comfortable.
Ooh,
And that's why I look
only
for.
17 though. I don't, even in Europe, I don't think he can drink. So I don't know if you can have a beer with him. That's tough.
That's
to
a good
say.
point.
Tough to say. No, but I think it's good that the conversations mellowed out. It was a little too heated for me. Got me too worked up and irritated. So it was nice.
Remember 2021?
I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, this is how it should have probably been from the get-go. But I'm glad that everyone kind of got more even-keeled on it. But
Yeah, but 2021, guy.
let's move forward from 2021. But I don't know where to fit this conversation in. So I think I might just get into it during the week's winners and losers a little bit. If you want to go into that segment of the episode.
Yeah, that's fine. Losers segment here where we'll talk about some positives from the weekend, some not so positives from the weekend. My first winner for the race is obviously Sir Lewis Hamilton, home race dub for his first victory in like over 2 years. But not only was it like a Lewis Hamilton win, I think what was really exciting about it was the fact that the conditions on track were so difficult to call, and it was going to be within like a lap's difference of, the right call, maybe not so right of a call. So I think what's really exciting is like, yeah, big props to Lewis. He drove the wheels off that thing. I think it was a really solid race from him, but it seems like the strategy from Mercedes overall, they had a really good understanding of what the weekend was going to look like and how they wanted to handle these changeable conditions on the track. So from that angle, I think it's really exciting. It's a home race victory. He's been, we know he's been hungry for so long. This is almost like very much like the scriptwriters saying that like Charles Leclerc gets to win his home race. it's actually super exciting that the script writers were like, all right, we can give one to Lewis Hamilton too here. Like, I think that's fine. So whoever was writing the script for the weekend really did Lewis Hamilton a big solid, because he's my first winner for the weekend.
He is also my first winner for the weekend, and I just want to echo.
What?
I know. I just want to echo really what you said there. He and the McLaren team as a whole, they had a great strategy. The car had great pace. I mean, even in the post-race press conferences, Max was saying how he felt like Red Bull, like really the way he stayed in the race was making the right strategy calls and everything throughout. And if I remember correctly, I believe Lewis pitted on the same exact laps as Max did, or like very close to that. Coming on through, it was like maybe the next lap or right in that same time frame, getting just the right calls as the conditions were changing and everything. He put a really just great drive out there, clean, comfortable. I guess that's what happens when you've won at a circuit 8 times. And his oh god, I have to find it. There was a tweet that I had that I'm going to have to see if I have it here. It was all of Lewis's finishing positions in, yes, so Lewis Hamilton at the British Grand Prix since 2014. 4 P1s in a row, then a P2, then 3 P1s, 2 P3s, and then a P1 this year. So he has podiumed every single year at the British Grand Prix since 2014, which is just ridiculous to have that kind of impressive consistency. But clearly he's comfortable at the circuit, and like you said, he drove the wheels off that car. He just really had a great day, and it was exciting. I was cheering for him when I saw that he was gonna win. I was like, Max might get him. Max is that little shark smelling blood and coming after him. But I was so excited for him. It's been a long time, yeah, I mean, a great way to get the home race win. Your last home race being with Mercedes, most likely. Mm-hmm. So a good way to go out with that for this season and all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think I don't think the Brits would have it any different. Who was your second winner here for the weekend?
So my second I believe it was my same as last week, but Nico Hülkenberg, a P6 finish again, just really crushed it. I mean, he had a great qualifies up in P6, then just has a really nice drive, good strategy, good control of his race throughout. Gets that P6 finish as well. Another 8 points for Haas, which is just massive, as they're quickly gaining on the V carbs, the RBs. Now just 4 points down to them in the Constructors' Championship. So a huge weekend, and Nico is just week to week. It's there's obviously been some improvements with the Haas car this year from previous iterations, but he's also just driving super well for them this year.
Yeah, I agree. And Hülkenberg is the wild card in that top 10, where he's kind of playing spoiler to drivers that probably in their mind feel like that's where they should be in some ways. So it's really nice to see just this spanner get thrown into the works every weekend with Nico, where it just feels like every race weekend in, we're just having to dedicate more and more time talking about Haas, talking about Hülkenberg, and what they're being able to accomplish, and kind of string together over the course of these race weekends. So yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that was a very solid performance, taking advantage of, again, a changeable track, and really kind of nailing the strategy for the race that Hulk and the Haas car had ahead of them, and really nailing it. So yeah, I think that's a great winner for the weekend.
Yeah, so big props to Nico, but how about you for your second winner of the week?
Yeah, I really liked Aston Martin. Honestly, like being in a race where Perez is a goner, Leclerc early has to deal with the Ferrari strategy calls again, where they're like, "Yeah, let's go on the green wall tires." Just horrible choice. So my thing is, it's a definite positive for Aston Martin to be there to with both of their cars to kind of scoop up those positions that if everybody's finishing kind of quote unquote where they should be, that would have been Perez's and Leclerc's spot basically,
And
but
George too.
and George. So I think it's exciting just that they are able to have consistency over the course of the race to be able to scoop up those both of those points paying positions. So yeah, I can't imagine the morale boost that would be going into the next couple stages of races, because that one's got to feel good, hooked up all weekend, not making any mistakes. So both Stroll and Alonso, I think, really improved on the performances that they've had recently, that this stands out.
Yeah, and I think especially after Alpine had kind of started to slip up into that potentially best of the rest spot, scooping up some of those last points and everything over the past couple of races. We had the Alpines getting those double points with P9, P10, and everything. This is a nice little bounce back for Aston Martin. Whether that will be the same way across the course of the rest of the season, of course, we'll have to wait and see. But I think it's a good morale boost for the team to have them back up there in the points and taking advantage of that lack of a few drivers who typically would be up there.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's interesting that you bring up Alpine because they're my second loser here for the weekend. And you mentioned the string of recent form that they had. It's a shame to see Gasly not even get to start the race, especially after taking the what'd you say? It's a 50 place penalty for all the parts that he had to take.
Yep.
So you relegate yourself to the back of the grid, and then on one of the formation laps, on your recce laps, you find out that something's wrong and we gotta not start the race. That's a really rough time, and it breaks kind of the momentum that they had. Obviously, we were talking about it. I think it was 4 race weekends where they were really improving. So just a big brick wall for Alpine to hit, unfortunately. So yeah, they're my loser there for the weekend. I just wanted to throw that into you real quick.
No, that's perfect because for one of my losers, we had the same. So with your second loser and my second loser, the McLaren team and their strategy, definitely a loser on the weekend. It was tough to see, and it is consistent now that they are just not making the right strategy calls, and that have kind of potentially cost Lando and Oscar both good opportunities at race wins here over the past few weeks.
I mostly agree. Do you agree, though, not just wrong calls, they're unwilling to make the risky calls?
Or just...
Because the double stack would have been risky, and then looking to undercut Lewis would have been risky. I think they were playing pretty safe. And is that what you're getting at?
I think for me, the double stack, they should have done it 100 out of 100 times. Like, it was clearly raining heavier. Other teams, Mercedes double stacked their drivers. They had no issue and everything. I understand that Oscar couldn't build that gap, but what they could have done is just double stack. Oscar loses 5 seconds sitting waiting for Lando to get through and get out of the pit box and to come in and everything. So you lose some time. Mercedes does too. So maybe in that instance, George hops over Oscar because you have a McLaren P1, P2 at that point in time. Like, maybe Oscar gets jumped by George in that instance. But instead, you have Oscar staying out for a lap, losing a ridiculous amount of time, and then being stuck way further down the grid and having to climb back up through. So I don't really feel... I feel like the risky strategy was for them to leave him out and say, it's like... it's just starting to rain. Like, the track should probably still be good enough to, like, have a relatively close lap time. I just think that it was a indecisive call, that they weren't really sure. Even Zach Brown on the pit wall, when they were talking to him, was like, we've kind of got to see what we're going to do. It would be tight for a double stack. Like, even him... But Mercedes was very direct with it, and it worked out really well for them, just with George, unfortunately, having the engine trouble and not finishing. But for that instance, just brutal. But also indecisiveness, because, we see Oscar at the end of the race. He gets put on the medium tires, and he is flying up through at the end of the race, gaining very, very quickly. He gained like 10 seconds on the other cars over those last laps and everything after putting on the medium tires. With Lando coming in, the team's like, Lewis is on the soft and Max is on the hard. Like, you have a fresh set of mediums, do you want to cover off either of these guys? And he's like, yeah, like, the slicks are definitely faster than inners at this point. Like, we need to go on a slick. And it wasn't like, hey, the medium has been the best tire for everyone on the grid across the day. And you have a brand new set of mediums. Let's go with that instead of going onto the soft tire while behind Lewis, with Lewis on the soft tire, hoping that he might be able to catch up. Like, Red Bull went the other way. They didn't have the medium, and they said, Lewis is on the soft, let's throw Max on the hard tire, and then he'll have plenty of tires to just try and chase people down at the end of the race. He's already behind. What are we losing? And with Lando, they, I think, could have easily made the same decision, but we're kind of wishy-washy on the radio calls, which I think he's in the car. He's been on the mediums. He was comfortable on the mediums. I think if you're like, hey, we think the medium's the best tire, let's go for it, I think he would have just been like, yeah, we need to be on slicks now. Let's do it. But throwing all this additional information out, I think just muddied the waters a bit too much. And another position that I think if he had been on the medium tires, he probably finishes P2, potentially P1.
Yeah, no, that's a really compelling argument, honestly. So where I saw the double stack is risky, you could really lose a lot of time in the pits. You're saying that no, the risky move was actually staying out on that ridiculously wet track on the slicks. You're having to tiptoe it around. You lose way more time like that than you do just waiting to get into the pit spot. I mean, I'm having a hard time disagreeing with that. So yeah, McLaren definitely squandering some advantages that they definitely had earlier in the race, and not not being decisive enough. Yeah, I think I would agree. There's a little bit of a larger conversation to have with Checo. I know there's shenanigans going on there. So tell me about Sergio and what you think's going to happen.
Well, just with Checo, he's my second loser for the week. But I mean, it starts off just super poorly qualifying. He's out in Q1, spins off into the gravel trap while on his warm up lap and everything coming out. There was a little bit of mixed conditions on the track and everything, but if that's the case, I mean, Checo's been driving for a long time. Like, you just have to be careful, and he's continually just squandering these opportunities. His last 6 qualifying performances have been in a car that Max is getting podiums, race wins, and everything. And just, I mean, Max is driving the wheels off the car, but Sergio, P11 qualifying, P16, P16, P8, P8, P19. He hasn't been in the top 5 or even say, hey, the top 6 in the past 6 weeks. Even if you say, hey, Max, both McLarens, both Mercedes, should probably be ahead of him based on pace. Like, he hasn't even been able to make it to P6 in the past 6 races a single time.
Right.
Like, it's okay to have outliers and have a bad race, something happens, but it's becoming such a consistent issue. It is a concern. With the contract that he just signed and everything, I mean, even looking head-to-head comparison between him and Nico Hulkenberg across 2024, Checo's made Q3 7 times in 12 races. Hulkenberg's made it 6 times in 12 races in a Haas. He is like nipping at Checo, so he's outscored Checo in points over the past few weeks as well. I think the points he got in the last 2 races are more than Checo's had in the last 4 races. I think it really is starting to call into question what Red Bull should do. I don't know what that decision is, but with Liam Lawson getting this test in Silverstone, Daniel Ricciardo's name's been thrown out. People asked, hey, what about Yuki? Would he potentially get moved up into that seat? And Christian Horner said, all of the drivers are on the table, basically. Like, they're not ruling out any potential options for having the best drivers lineup. Checo drops down into P6 in the drivers' standings now as well, so it gets passed up by Piastri. He's just struggling really hard, and I don't know what the answer is, but I can't imagine that all of these conversations and everything are doing him any positives. But he also has to do some of those positives himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's just really, really got to get out of his own head and just drive. It's been a rough stretch here, and I was really hoping, after seeing him kind of mentally collapse when Max started to run away last year in the championship, I thought this year it started off well. He kind of knew his role in the team. He's not the number 1 driver, but he can get solid points. He had a strong start, being competitive and all, and it's just slowly slipped away.
Yeah, definitely not what you want to see for him and his career, but like you were alluding to, it's going to make some tough choices for Red Bull and put them in a position where they're going to be, hunting for the right lineup where they think they should just be chasing down points like every weekend with both cars. So I imagine it's frustrating for all parties involved. But yeah, it seems like they're going to have to look to make a move soon. And yeah, it's interesting that they're considering each of the drivers that they have available, because I think any of them would be an exciting move up. And just if you're looking at it, you have to think like it'll be different and better than what Sergio Perez is able to do. So yeah, definitely. Man, a snowball downward of a conversation this has been about Checo's 2024.
Yeah, and like you said, an exciting move potentially for those drivers and everything that could potentially fill that role. But at the same time, I'm not fully there. There's still half the season to go, but it's almost at a can it get worse position with Checo. Like
Oh, for sure it can.
it but I mean, no, I mean like if you put a different driver into that car instead of him, like based on current performance and everything, like could throwing one of those other guys in that car really be that much worse than Checo currently not finishing in the points week after week? Obviously, like yeah, someone could be like just brutal and be finishing P18 every time, but based on current current position, Checo's not finishing in the points week to week
Right.
either. So it's yeah, a really difficult position that they've put themselves in. I talked about it when they announced that they had re-signed Checo for 2 years. I thought it was too early in the season to make that call. I don't want to say I told you so, but like, kind of told you so. So we'll hopefully see an upswing. Maybe he can kind of reel himself in where we've got a little gap. These back-to-back-to-back race weekends with the triple header are tough on all of the drivers in general, but I think mentally, if you're struggling, that has to be hard to push that out of your mind of last week's struggles when you're right back in the car and everything the very next week. So we'll wait and see, but maybe the Silverstone test, I'm very curious to see how Liam Lawson does and what his lap times and all look like.
I imagine everybody is waiting to see like him and Sainz are like two of like the biggest conversations I think right now as far as like driver lineups. So yeah, I think a lot of people are in our same boat as well.
Yeah, so lots still be decided, but just to move on to some other team notes and everything, what are some of the other teams that you just wanted to hit some notes on going through here for the episode?
Yeah, I think just hitting Ferrari just a little bit. We talked a little bit about Leclerc having the rough tire strategy for the weekend, but a little bit of bad, a little bit of good for Ferrari in that regard. Sainz has a decent finishing position, is able to take home the fastest lap point as well. So not all bad here from Ferrari. Obviously off the pace of what the McLaren's, Red Bulls, and Mercedes were doing. But yeah, Sainz still up there to grab some points, so I think that's definitely a positive. I was disappointed to see George out so late in the race, especially just for like some type of mechanical failure that was not his fault at all. I was saying to a buddy, like, you always just feel for the driver in that regard, because like they had nothing to do with it. They're just in the car, so tough for him in that regard, especially coming off a weekend where like he literally just won a race and now he's DNFing 30 laps in. Very stark difference in that regard. And other than that, the only other I think glimmering light that pops out for me is Alexander Albon being up in the points this weekend for Williams, and Logan Sargent having just a solid weekend through and through. Out qualifying some people, or not out qualifying, out finishing some people, with way more experience. So I think Sargent and Albon both had good weekends, which leads me to say that Williams did okay this weekend. But other than that, yeah, I think that's about it.
No, I'm definitely with you there. The going back to Ferrari for a second, Leclerc, just he's he's really had a lot of struggles since the win in Monaco. This week was, of course, some bad strategy calls, along with unfortunately not getting knocked out in Q2, not making it into Q3 in qualifying. So
that's right.
Tough starting position for Charles that he kind of ended up in. But then, along with that, the awful strategy calls with the intermediate tire, Checo and Red Bull had the same situation. So, doing themselves no favors whatsoever after just rough qualifying positions. So that was just a bummer. But yeah, with Williams, and especially, I mean, Albon, I know is a good driver. Logan, that P11, so close to getting that last point. A really good weekend just across the board for him. So I'm very happy to see that. And then with Yuki picking up that last point, just a solid drive for him and everything. He's had a couple weeks where it seemed he's struggled a little bit more than Daniel Ricciardo in particular, and picking up that point, it's a nice way to kind of reset and bounce back a little bit for him as well. But yeah, that's kind of covers the majority of my notes. Just another little stat that I saw, not a max fact this week, but just for 2024. We have now had 6 different winners in 12 races, so it is wide open. I think this is one of the it's becoming one of the more exciting seasons that we've had of recent years and everything, in terms of how open and competitive it is with a number of these teams vying. This is what you really love to see. It makes it exciting week in and week out to not know what's going to happen. I mean, even our most recent super competitive, exciting year was really just competitive between 2 drivers at the top, with 2021 with Max and Lewis across the season. Like that was extremely exciting and competitive, with just 2 drivers at the top. Six different winners in 12 races is massive, and it just, in my opinion, bodes well for the competitiveness of Formula One. So it's awesome to see that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We've seen the qualifying pace over the last couple of weekends really what's the word? I was gonna say thin out, but like it's just really close. Like the differences between drivers' qualifying times are being separated by like tenths and thousandths. So yeah, I just said to say it definitely seems like one of the most competitive years that we've had, and yeah, very exciting. And I think Silverstone this year is kind of a benchmark and really shows that, where there were a bunch of different drivers that were in contention for a win. It kind of actually felt like an IndyCar race in that regard, where the longer it goes, the more people have potential to win the race. And I think that's very exciting. So yeah, 2024, I look forward to looking back on 2024 and being like, that was the year. 2024, the golden age of Formula One.
I think we really will. I think we'll look back and be like, man, that was a crazy year with a lot of really good drivers in machinery that could make them competitive. We've had conversations over the past years of like, oh, Lando's a really good driver, but McLaren just hasn't been able to give him the car, and like Leclerc was good, but Red Bull's car just like outmatched him across the season and everything. Now we're seeing all of these drivers in very comparable machinery, and also machinery that can be a little track dependent for who might be the quickest car out there.
Sure.
So yeah, just super exciting for the season. The constructors fight is still by no means done. Ferrari and McLaren are now separated by 7 points. Mercedes is climbing their way back in. Red Bull has a little bit of a lead still, but it is by no means out of contention. So a lot more racing to see for the season. And I'm looking forward to that. And like you said, looking back in a couple of years and going, man, that was a banger of a year.
Yeah, so far it has been. But we come to the end of another banger episode covering the 2024 Great Britain Grand Prix, where we had Lewis Hamilton with the dub. Top step at the podium, we have Max Verstappen coming in second, Lando Norris in third. So yeah, one for the history books. But as we get to the end of the episode, we're gonna get into the cool down lap. Just some tidbits from life. So Aaron, why don't you start us off? What's your flavor of the week?
Sweet. So for my flavor of the week this week, my food is just like barbecue food. We had for the 4th of July, we had some people over. I, of course, was the grill master out there cooking up some hot dogs and all, but we had a whole spread, and friends who came over brought lots of delicious goodies. We had some barbecued pulled pork. There were all sorts of dips and desserts and appetizers and everything that people brought. And it's fun having people over, having a cookout, and just kind of having all of those different foods to graze on and everything. So that was a lot of fun, a lot of good food. For my music this week, it's actually been now for probably almost a month. But there's a new album called No Hands from Joey Valance and Bray, who are artists who I had just recently come across. They I'd seen clips on TikTok, which I was like, oh, I've got to check this out, and saw when the album dropped. I had it on repeat for a while. It's very fun, cool, like 90s or like kind of old school rap feel a little bit. There's some it's very well written, but some more like little bits of humor added in lyrically and everything. Anthony Fantano had done a review of it and had given it some pretty good props. So overall, just a really solid album. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's upbeat, and I think really well done from newer artists. As far as I'm aware, I think this is their first studio project, and I believe it was primarily self-produced, but they had some different artists that were featured. Danny Brown being one of the big ones that was featured on one of the songs. So a solid album. I would recommend checking it out if you're into some of the old school rap and whatnot. And then my visual medium for this week, House of Dragons, the Game of Thrones kind of spin-off series, has been very entertaining. I enjoy the Game of Thrones universe and all a lot, and so I've been watching that weekly when the new episodes come out, and enjoying that quite a bit.
Hell yeah. How are you high on Danny Brown as a rapper?
There's a few songs that I like of his. I haven't listened to a lot of his catalog, but I think he's pretty lyrically sound for the most part, but he's a more lighthearted, typically like rapper from what I've heard. With most of the songs that I've listened to, it's not as
fair.
Like it's just or maybe not lighthearted. It's like kind of smoother than some artists and everything.
Sure.
I think he has a nice sound with what I have heard. So, do you have personal opinions? I saw your face when I said his name, so I assume.
No, he just has to my ear. He just has a really like unmistakable voice, and his flow kind of, this is gonna sound like pretentious as fuck, but his flow reminds me of MF Doom, but
Okay.
not because they are similar flows, but because like when you hear it, you know it's this guy. Like nobody
Gotcha.
is
Okay.
like sentence structuring like them. So I think in that way he has an unmistakable kind of a signature sound, I would say.
I think you would enjoy the album. It has a lot of those like old school rap vibes, like
Sure.
MF Doom and like Jizza and some of those other artists. So with Danny Brown on it, that song like blends very well.
That's sick. Yeah, he's not somebody that I have a lot of exposure to, but anytime I hear him like on features or whatever, I'm like, damn, like this guy is killing it. He has a feature on Run the Jewels 3. I forget what the name of the song is, but he kills it on that. So yeah, no, I was surprised to hear his name. But yeah,
Okay.
overall, no, I've got nothing but love for the guy. His style is really fun.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. I was trying to figure out what the facial expression was in regards to. So yeah, definitely a solid album to check out. But that's my flavor of the week. What have you got going on for your flavor of the week this week?
All right, so my food and my music, I'm just gonna give to you really quickly because my visual medium's kind of sick. So food for the week, pot stickers at home. Me and Sarah are, I think we're like appetizer lovers. So now that we've
Okay.
kind of locked in like the making of pot stick, well, she did this batch mostly. She did the wrapping. But having pot stickers at home is a great little appetizer choice. So I love those. And then my music here for the week, kind of an old one. I actually might have talked about it recently, but I've really enjoyed the album. It's Crown by Rhapsody from a couple years back. Just, I think it's like 11 or 12 tracks, so pretty short,
Okay.
but just some. It's just some good vibes. It's just, a little bit of funk, a little bit of soul going on. So Crown by Rhapsody is really fun. But my visual medium over the weekend, there is going on currently, bro. Have you heard of the Esports World Cup?
I have heard of it, but I have no idea how it works or like what the
Okay.
format of any of it is.
All right, I'm gonna give you the highlights here. So, multiple titles are being like included.
Okay.
So, what the Esports World Cup is looking to do is find the best esports club in the world. So, what they're doing basically is saying like if you're an esports organization and you have teams for multiple different esports, we want you. We're putting on a 2 month long
Wow.
tournament basically in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where they have this like massive, it's basically like a festival grounds is what's going on, where they're hosting Rainbow Six Siege, Dota 2, League of Legends, Counter-Strike 2, whatever the soccer game is, I think
Oh,
it's like FIFA,
yeah.
Rocket League, like so many different titles. And the idea is as you take victories in these games, your club gets points towards this club championship trophy. So the idea is like win as much as you can at these esports World Cup events, and your team is gonna go up and up on this. It's like this massive
Like
thing.
ranking and yeah.
Yeah, for like the course of these 2 weeks.
Interesting.
The undertaking, just thinking of like what they're trying to do, is just gargantuan. It's just wild. Like esports traditionally has never been lumped in. It's all just individual communities surrounding just individual games. But now these are the first this is the first time I've heard them referred to as like esports clubs, where they're
Yeah.
factoring in that they're going to be a part of like multiple different games. Okay, so that's like basically the general format. But
Gotcha.
then here's like the anime aspect of it. Every team or participant, because I believe they have StarCraft, and StarCraft is just like 1 versus 1 or whatever. So teams slash participants all get what's called a key, and the key it's literally like a
I've
physical.
seen this. Yeah, with the and you can like build it into your trophy or something. Like the keys you've collected.
That's what you're supposed to do, yeah. So like when you win an event, you take your key, you put it into the trophy, and then that trophy like gets you points for your club. Not only do you get to put your key into the trophy, you get to take and destroy the keys of the teams that you take down and knock out.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
when your trophy is made for you, you get to like throw the pieces of their keys like into your trophy, and then they're in like the larger. It's like a monument. It's like a big display. So they're basically like physically representing like the fall of teams, and like the great ones like rising above. So when I was watching it the first time, I was like, dude, what the fuck is this? Like an anime? Like seriously. But very, very cool nonetheless. Now that you understand the context, they just had the League of Legends tournament this past weekend. Top teams were there. Grand final was a best of 5 between T1 and Top Esports. So like the best teams in the world are here. It's literally like an A tier, like S tier event, right? So T1 versus Top Esports, dude, sick final. I mean, from a production standpoint, I've got some qualms. But overall, I mean, it's just two of the best teams in the world going head to head, and it was a really exciting final. And like to see T1 do the whole like key into the trophy, they're all like awkwardly like trying to pick what keys they want to like throw away and whatever. It was all very fun and whatever. But just the idea of the undertaking, now, like, I'm invested. I'm like, damn, I wonder actually what organization is going to be able to win across multiple titles. So all very exciting. Give me some thoughts here.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I think the production aspect makes sense that it's a bit weaker than the standard competitions because one, like it's an entirely new event. Two, depending based on location, I'm sure there's some people who didn't want to be involved.
Sure.
Going to Saudi Arabia and everything to be involved with the broadcasts and everything. So it makes sense that some of those, but of course a new event is always going to have its hiccups with any sort of production and whatnot as well. I think it's a great concept. It's cool that there's the potential that a team could maybe crush in like Valorant, or a club could crush in like Valorant, CSGO, and like Rocket League or something, and potentially finish higher than a club that has teams spread across all of these events who are just not finishing as high. I think it's a really intriguing way to do that, and a better system than I think has been figured out in a lot of other things. Like they've talked about sort of motorsports World Cup and things like that as well. That was like a conversation a couple years ago. And I think a lot of the drivers were like, we just all drive different stuff. So it's just like us competing against our own normal like competition if you're doing it. And like but we're representing our country instead of our team. I think that this is a kind of unique way to do that with the clubs and everything, and I mean that's a massive scale to have that many different games having tournaments and everything to compete. Like that's definitely a massive undertaking and pretty cool concept and event. It sounds like.
Yeah, very much agree. I think they said it's like $60 million up for grabs, like overall. Across all the different
That's
whatevers. I
insane.
mean, yeah,
Like that's a massive prize pool comparatively to probably any of these esports, except maybe Dota is the only one that probably compares to that with the prize pool. But
yeah, I think they were trying to kind of knock it out of the water, but dude, very exciting. I'm gonna be paying attention to it like overall. Obviously I don't care about every esport, but there'll definitely be some that I'll be checking out, and I may learn a thing or two about a new one. So I think that'll be exciting. But yeah, that was my visual medium for the week. But I figured you would appreciate that because it's like kind of an exciting thing.
yeah, very cool sounding event. I will have to look a bit more into it, check it out a little bit. But of course, now wrapping up the cooldown lap, that's the end of our episode this week, ladies and gentlemen, and people all around who are listening and watching. We really appreciate anyone taking the time to spend with us and have had a blast putting this out for another week.
Yeah, if you enjoy the episode, don't be afraid. Hit subscribe, hit follow, give us a like. Do what you got to do to let us know that you enjoyed the episode. We just really appreciate you being here and taking the time to listen to our thoughts about Formula One and motorsport. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for everybody tuning in, and have a great evening. Peace out, everyone.
See you next time.